So let's go back to that opening video. That was Hans Rosling, if you're unaware. He's a great statistician, a great speaker, lots of energy. So I want to put on my professor hat, and I want to explain how we got all those people out of poverty, because he didn't bother to do that in his 5 minutes. All right. So to do that, we need to step back to 1800 here in the United States. Except this was not the United States in 1800. We got to go 2,000 miles away to a little country all east of the Mississippi, 16 states. It doesn't seem that long ago, 1800, but 1800, Florida was still part of the Spanish Empire. The Great Plains, the middle of the continent, was part of the French Empire. Right? 1800, there was a presidential election that year, and it was Thomas Jefferson that got elected. And if you remember your history books, a few years later, he bought Louisiana from a guy named Napoleon. Right, speaking of Napoleon, he was over there in Europe. He had just become emperor of France a year ago, and he had yet to go off and conquer Europe. So set the stage. All right, so 1800, we're looking at a world with 1 billion people, and nearly everybody is poor. So what happened? Well, in 1800, you have to realize that everyone in the United States, nearly everyone, 95% of Americans, 95% of Europeans, and just about everyone in India and China and Japan, they were farmers. Right? And farming is a really bad job when everyone's a farmer, because you grow food, your family eats the food, nobody pays you anything. Right? The only way to make money as a farmer is to have people who are not farmers. Today, 99% of Americans and Europeans are not farmers. All right, so how do we make that switch? Well, something came along. It was called the Industrial Revolution. Right? Revolution not of guns, but of ideas, and one key idea. That key idea was to move from a world of human and horsepower to a world of machine power. Right? For example, in 1800, you would have seen one horse pull one plow. That's a 1 horsepower plow, where the term comes from. And later on, you would have seen a 100 horsepower tractor, and that would have pulled 3 or 4 or 5 plows. Right? And it could do that because it was burning oil. In 1800, you would see carts being pulled by 2 horses, and by 1850, you would see 20,000 horsepower steam engines pulling trains. But this wasn't a crazy new idea, because they did have machines in 1800. If you wanted to grind your grain and turn it into flour, you didn't do that by hand, you went to the mill. And if you were near a stream, you would have gone to a mill with a water wheel. That water wheel would have had about a kilowatt, 1,000 watts of power. Right, if you want a kilowatt of power today, you just walk over to the wall and you plug something in, because today we have much bigger machines. They make electricity, and they do that on the scale of billions of watts. We have hundreds of machines in this country that do billions of watts each. Right? That's the big change. The formula for the Industrial Revolution is not complicated. You take energy. For 200 years, that was us taking it out of the ground. That was fossil fuels. You take that energy and you turn it into industry. Industry creates jobs. Jobs creates wealth. And lo and behold, you move a whole lot of people out of poverty. We've been doing that in the United States and Europe for 200 years. That's why we're ahead. In India and China, they've only been doing it for about 50 years. That's why they're catching up. Right, so where are we today? We're at a world where 2 billion people live way better than the kings did in 1800. We're in a world where 3 billion people aspire to live like those 2 billion, and their kids and their grandkids will. They're catching up. And we're in a world where 2 billion people have been left behind. And this is the point where the story sounds good, but where I take a little bit of offense at how the UN describes this. They describe this war on poverty as being won, and they seem to overlook the fact that twice as many people are poor as there were 200 years ago. There was 1 billion poor people in 1800, and there's 2 billion people who are now. So we're winning and we're losing at the same time. There's one other flaw, but to do that, I got to show you this by country. So unfortunately, I don't have the BBC graphics budget, so we're going to do is PowerPoint. All right, so here's a PowerPoint slide. It's the 194 UN member countries, and each one by per capita GDP. All right, think of that as average income. It's close enough. All right, so coming in at number 12 is the United States. Biggest, richest country on the planet, $54,000 a year. Remember that number, we're going to use it again. Right? Halfway down the list, we get to China. Now note, China's average income is not even close to half the average income of the United States, despite being halfway down the list, despite that graph looking like it was half. That was a misleading graph. The numbers along the bottom were not what you think they were. I don't have time to explain that. We'll keep scrolling down. 2/3 of the way down the list, we get to the Philippines. Now we start to get interesting. So we're at $2,800 a year. And we have mostly Americans in the room. That's a really hard number to scratch in your head when that's like the rent in Seattle for a month. Here's how to think about it. That US number was 54,000. Let's divide that by 10. That's 5,400. That's too high. So let's divide that again in half. We would get to 2,700. So roughly what we're saying here is that when the average American earns $1, the average Filipino earns 5 cents. That's the difference. And I'll let you ponder that when we keep scrolling. We get to Tanzania and Uganda. First few countries under $1,000. That's a penny or two, so we'll skip that idea and we'll try a different one, which is there are 365 days in a year. If someone earns $2 a day every day, they get to $730. So Uganda, on average, the average Ugandan earns $2 a day, and if it was $3 a day, we'd get to $1,100. That's too high for Tanzania. The numbers come out to $2.60. So here's the other flaw. To me, it seems like $2.60 a day is poor. My drink at Starbucks is $3 and a penny. Right? These people can't afford my drink. They work all day and can't afford my drink. But the UN draws that line of extreme poverty. They moved that line last year. They were really proud. They announced it. It was big news. They moved it from $1 to $1.90. So that, again, that graph and those numbers are misleading because there are actually way more people who are poor. They're just not extremely poor, according to the UN. All right, want to see extremely poor, we go to the bottom of the list. Third from the bottom is Malawi. So that's an easy one to compute. That number is less than 365, which means on average, right, the average farmer in Malawi earns less than $1 a day. Right, I say farmer because the reality here is that from the Philippines down, 85% of all those people in all those countries are farmers. We have what we have really. The reason why we have people left behind is that 1/3 of the planet hasn't really joined the Industrial Revolution yet. They will. They're getting there, but they haven't yet. And that's why they are still below that poverty line. All right, now I didn't pick these countries randomly. I picked them because tonight you're going to hear entrepreneurs from the United States joining us remotely to the Philippines. Couldn't make it tonight, they had to go home. And then 2 companies from Uganda, 1 from Tanzania, and 2 from Malawi. Right, these are the Fledge 7 fledglings. Now you know a little bit about their countries. What you're going to learn about them as companies is that 6 out of 7 are already up and running with customers and revenues. These are real companies. You can clap for that. That's a good one. Or clap for this one because 3 of them are already profitable. And what's amazing when you hear their stories is that everything you hear that they've done so far, they have done out of their own pockets. They're all bootstrapped companies. The first and only funder into them is Fledge, and we write really, really little checks. We only give them $20,000. Most of that's spent to be here, and we haven't even finished paying them yet. Right? So they need more money, they'll ask for money, and they need to grow. Right? These are all companies that are making the world a better place. That's what fledglings do. And they do it using a model that you don't hear enough about. This is the for-profit model. This is the model that gets a Coca-Cola within 2 hours walk of everyone on the planet. How's that work? It's really simple. People buy it for more than it costs to make, and therefore it's profitable to Coca-Cola, and therefore they can bring it to more places. And they've been doing that for 100 years. So give the fledglings 100 years, and we will reach every single person on the planet. Make their lives better, solving hunger, solving poverty, solving the environment. All right, with that, I'll let them speak for themselves. I give you the Fledge 7 fledglings.